Australia is the world's largest island. Geographic separation over thousands of years resulted in 90% of the species found in Australia being endemic to this vast land. And for the locals, living here means living among some of the world's most dangerous animals. Some of these animals can kill instantly, others leave lasting injuries, and some can just inflict a nasty bite. In all, 72 animals can cause us damage. But which one tops the list of most dangerous? Entering the arena first up is one of Australia's underwater adventurers, a much admired animal with an easygoing reputation, but every so often it bites. Gliding gracefully, diving, twisting, turning under the shimmering waves. Large doe eyes, twitching whiskers, and an adorably inquisitive personality are difficult to resist. You want to get close, you want to swim, dive, and play along. A day out surfing with friends in the seaside town of Lancelin turned into a nightmare for 13-year-old Ella Murphy. Lancelin is a beachside recreational hotspot 130 kilometers north of Perth on the west coast of Australia. It's a go-to destination heavily populated by surfers throughout the year. It was Friday the 13th, an ominous sign in the April of 2007. The scene was set.
We went out in a little dinghy that was probably about a kilometre off the beach.
Ella and her friends were taking turns being towed on a surfboard behind a small boat, quarreling about whose turn it was next. Ella quickly took to the water and unknowingly put her life in grave danger.
And I was coming down the face of a wave, and I let go of the rope, and then I saw kind of a shadow in the water.
The menacing shadow lurking beyond the breaking waves, within seconds barreling toward her, would change Ella's life forever.
I saw the sea lion jump out of the water and come straight for me, head on. It grabbed me with the bottom jaw there and the top jaw there and kind of clamped down. So it broke my jaw and knocked out 4 teeth and cut a big hole right there. And that's where the main kind of arteries come down, and you could actually see that artery pumping. And if that had have split, then I would have bled to death in seconds.
Growing up in this idyllic coastal town, Ella had often swum with the playful, friendly, and inquisitive sea lions inhabiting Lancelin. Never had she encountered such ferocity and aggression from these cute creatures. This fateful day had her fearing for her life.
It was all happening so fast that I couldn't make sense of exactly what was going on until I was actually dragged into the water, and that's when it kind of clicked that I was in a lot of trouble at that point.
Ella had been viciously mauled by an endangered Australian sea lion. This cute, furry marine mammal is not normally known to exhibit such brutal, aggressive behavior toward humans.
If it's cornered in any way, then it's going to bolt towards the water. And of course, the last resort is lunging and actually biting someone, which is extremely rare.
The Australian sea lion commonly live to 8 or 9 years of age and are the rarest pinniped in the world, with numbers across the coast of southern and western Australia numbering a mere 12,000. The sea lion is neither increasing in population nor expanding its habitat range. After an epic 17-month-long breeding cycle, only 1 pup is born per female, severely inhibiting any rapid increase in population.
It's a dangerous animal. It's a carnivorous animal. It's got a bite like a big dog.
The breeding and haul-out colonies of the West Coast provide vital management and research content due to the significant risk of local extinction due to the site fidelity and low gene flow between colonies. This factor, coupled with increased human interest in getting up close and personal with wild animals, encouraged David Newsom, professor of biology at Murdoch University in Western Australia, to carry out research of human impact on the stress and behaviors of this particular endangered species.
With the sea lion work here in Western Australia, we wanted to understand 2 things. We want to understand people's impressions and understanding of the sea lions and why they're on the beach. That was really important because this is an animal that comes and lies on the beach all day long at these haul-out sites. We got a sense that people really didn't understand that. You know, these sea lions travel up to 60 kilometres offshore to their feeding grounds. dive to 100, sometimes 300 meters. And that's physiologically extremely demanding. So when they get back, they would like a nice rest on the beach. If it opens its eyes or raises its head, and if it rears up, is this a gradational response to disturbance?
Sea lions spend days recuperating after long-haul fishing trips on rocky offshore islands known as haul-out sites. Disruptions to this natural process arrive in the form of regular tour boats visiting these coastal islands throughout the Australian summer. Studies have found a distinct lack of public understanding as to why the sea lions are on these beaches for days at a time. Seemingly doing nothing may gravely affect the health and behavior of this unique mammal.
Say you've been on a long trek for 2 or 3 days and you come back and you want to sleep, and then in your room there's all these people standing around that you've never seen before. You're going to lie there with your eyes open. And that's what the sea lion does with the people on the beach. Therefore, that constitutes a disturbance. Most people did not understand that.
Every step we take off the shore and into the ocean is a venture into a potentially dangerous situation, despite the cuddly persona of some of our favorite sea creatures.
I guess the stigma that a sea lion has is kind of quite cute, friendly and cuddly and balancing a ball on its nose. I'd never had any trouble with any of them before, and often it was kind of like, keep your distance from them. You know, this is their home and I'm invading it.
Action occurring on or around a haul-out or breeding site, whether threatening or not, has the potential to provoke an aggressive response. A wild animal feeling threatened will defend itself in the only way it knows how. 300 kilograms of explosive speed and huge teeth capable of biting and tearing flesh launched upon Ella Murphy on that near-fatal day.
I first saw the sea lion in the water. I wasn't entirely sure what it was at all. At first, I felt kind of excited and almost like, oh wow, what's this? And then a split second later, I just saw these enormous, dirty teeth coming towards me, this open mouth, and it was terrifying. It was impossible to explain. It has grabbed me and pulled me into the water, and I remember feeling this enormous weight and thrashing and kicking around, just trying to get up to the surface. And eventually it did let go, and I surfaced and came out of the water and kind of looked around and realized that the water was, you know, red.
With blood pooling around her, Ella realized something was wrong, terribly wrong. She felt no pain, her adrenaline was skyrocketing, but she knew she had been hit by something very, very big.
I couldn't see how big the animal was, but I knew that it was an enormous weight. I felt a lot of pressure, almost like I had been holding my breath for too long.
A few seconds pinned underwater beneath the weight of a 300-kilogram sea lion felt like forever, thrashing and punching in the hope of taking another breath.
I felt like I was under the water for an extremely long time. It was probably 3 or 4 seconds, not a very long time at all. And when I came up, I was gasping for air, and I was just terrified. I had to get out of the water. It was an extremely terrifying experience, being in the water and then being pulled back into the boat. I felt just that safety wash over me.
This sense of safety out of the water, separated from her vicious assailant, was short-lived for Ella. The sheer terror on the faces of her friends told another story.
I remember sitting down at the front of the boat and having a towel wrapped around my neck, and the man who was driving the boat kind of looked at me with this terror in his eyes and said, "There's a big hole in your neck and we're not sure what's going to happen." And with that, I'm in and out. I can't really grab onto consciousness.
Speeding to the jetty, scrambling into an ambulance, and driving for over an hour to the closest hospital, tensions were soaring. The towels wrapped around Ella's head and neck were removed, indicating just how horrific her injuries were. She had lost a lot of blood, there was a gaping hole in her neck, and the threat of infection in her jaw was high.
There's no way of describing it. It was the most pain that I've ever felt in my life. I received 60 stitches in the hole that was in my neck, probably about the same amount in my face and inside my mouth. I had my teeth kind of removed and put back in, and they tried to kind of clean up the mess that had been made there. And I also had water on my lungs and a lot of worry with infection because it is, an aquatic animal.
A playful day out scurfing a kilometer off the beach and in very close proximity to an Australian sea lion breeding site didn't pan out so well for Ella. The enormous males can be very aggressive when romance is on the cards.
The real aggression will be when they're at the breeding site and then the females are there and then the males are competing for dominance at the site, and then they will be fighting each other then to see who can mate with the females.
The Australian sea lion has an elongated, blunt snout, not dissimilar to that of a dog, with small, tightly rolled external ears and long, dense whiskers. Diving anywhere between 100 to 300 meters below sea level, its whiskers come in handy disturbing fish from the murky depths of the ocean floor. Sea lions predominantly feed 60 kilometers off the coast, where there is an abundance of fish and squid. The deep, dark depths of the ocean bring the sea lion face to face, not only with the fish it would like to consume, but its biggest predator.
When the sea lions are on the beach at the haul-out site, they're probably not panicking in the presence of humans because their greatest threat to their mortality, really, under natural conditions, exists in the water, and that's the great white shark.
A mere 6 weeks after surgery was all it took for this incredibly resilient and vivacious young girl to get back in the ocean, surfing the very same waves that almost killed her. This young woman and marine specialists concur the Australian sea lion is a wondrous, intelligent, and inquisitive animal to be respected, not feared.
We just sit there in awe, in absolute awe at this animal that can swim for 60 to 100 kilometers out to sea, dive for 100 to 300 meters, and this exhausting fishing trip, and then it's coming back and it's having the rest of the beach. So if it's a combination of respect and awe and keeping your distance so they can have the sleep that they deserve.
I had no animosity towards sea lions, and I think that what happened to me was just a freak attack. And I strongly urged people to, give them their own space and try to, avoid antagonizing them in any way. And I think it's kind of like my spirit animal, yeah.
Animals are competitive by nature. They need to be to survive. So in keeping with the action, we're gonna rank them according to just how dangerous they can be. We'll scrutinize each one, highlighting how they can affect your life, quite literally, allowing you to decide if you're game enough to get as close as some of our experts. Although it's a freak encounter, the warning is to keep your distance. This animal could be dangerous. It's first up, so taking the top spot in the arena. But spinning into the contest is a creature that instills fear to the masses. Lurking. Watching closely. On the prowl. Slowly crawling over your skin. You feel the small hairs creeping, tingling. Then before you know it, you're screaming. You're in your own horror movie, and your co-star is the tarantula.
The characteristics of the Australian tarantula are that they're quite large, they have really big fangs on them, and they're prone to bite.
For many years, the biggest, hairiest creature you can find has been invading the silver screen, torturing the senses of all who watch, sending shivers down your spine. The tarantula is most often the culprit. These ground-dwelling spiders have a large, hairy body which varies in color from dark chocolate brown to pale fawn, often with a silvery sheen. Enough for most people to leave it well alone. But if you get too close, you'll soon know they have really big fangs and they're prepared to bite. If a tarantula bites you, it will stab you with its fangs and inject a dangerous venom that contains a complex mixture of components.
There's quite a number of different molecules in the venom that have a range of different activities. These activities are generally quite specific to various targets in the body, and they act by either blocking or activating nerve currents.
This is one nasty bite. Symptoms of tarantular envenomation include nausea and vomiting for 24 hours, plus, of course, the pain from the fangs piercing and sinking into your skin.
In the case of the tarantulas, it's both male and female that can cause problems.
The majority of tarantula bites occur when a person or an animal encounters a male during mating season. The Australian tarantulas live in a burrow for most of their lives. The danger is when the male reaches maturity and comes out of its burrow looking for females.
They walk up to the burrow and tap around the top to attract the female out. Once the female comes out, they actually mate front on. It will have a couple of hundred eggs.
These eggs will grow and hatch into hundreds of little spiderlings. Some of the spiderlings will cannibalize each other, and the survivors will live in the burrow until they're big enough to leave and set up their own burrows.
Australian tarantulas do have quite a long life cycle. They can live up to 20-25 years for females. Males will generally go through a maturing molt after 5 to 7 years, but it can depend a bit on the environment, and they will only live for a couple of months after they've matured.
Tarantulas are invertebrates and have hard exoskeletons covering their bodies. In order to grow, they must molt. Molting is the periodic shedding of a tarantula's exoskeleton. Legs, hair, fangs, spinners, reproductive organs, all are cast off during molting. Young spiderlings molt often, adult females usually once per year, but adult males will usually only molt once.
It is usually a change in atmospheric humidity that causes the male to go through its maturing molt, and that will be around the wet season in the tropics.
Throughout the tropics, you can hear the Australian tarantula. When the spider is disturbed or feeling challenged, it will often create a whistling sound, thus revealing the Australian tarantula's other name of whistling spider.
Some of the species actually have little hairs on them that they can rub and make a hissing noise, so you can actually hear it from a couple of meters away.
Unlike many other spiders, the tarantula's web is used for little more than lining the burrow and building an egg sac. Each spider has their own burrow, and even the young spiders are kicked out of the mother's burrow quite young to set up their own home. They then sit and wait.
They'll sit near the top when they want to eat, and any bug or lizard or frog that happens to hop by, they'll run out and grab it, inject it with the venom, and then pull it back down into the burrow. The burrows can be quite deep, up to 1 metre or 2 metres deep. They're generally lined with some web and have some web around the top as a prey detection device. The burrows generally go down far enough in the soil to protect the spiders from great variations in temperature.
Buried deep beneath the Earth's surface without a trace. This alone sounds like the stuff of horror movies. Being envenomated, dragged back into a long, deep burrow, then devoured by a large, hairy, big-fanged spider. Experts will have you believe there's very little danger to humans.
The Australian tarantulas are fairly shy, so there's not a huge number of bites on people. They pretty much only attack in defence. They're not aggressive in an attacking way. They won't chase after you.
However, if your worst nightmare is arachnophobia, all reasoning will be abandoned, scientific evidence will be ignored, and the fear factor, well, that had probably well and truly kicked in long before now. A horror movie star, eerily creeping its way into the arena. There's no doubt this animal is scary, but it's not going to knock off the sea lion from its podium spot. It's going to nestle in at number 2. But keen to take on the top is an animal that's only recently been classified as dangerous to humans. In the Australian wilderness, danger comes in many forms and from many directions. It can come from below the water, on the ground, in the ground, and maybe even from above. There are plenty of creepy crawlies that could be sheltering in that very tree you're standing under. Some are seriously threatening, and some just look the part. Tree snakes do tend to get a bit of a bad rap, often portrayed as evil beasts hanging from the branches of trees waiting to pounce on you suddenly from above. But this tree snake does pose some level of risk.
I've got a brown tree snake, and they're potentially dangerous. They are a snake that can envenomate you. They have rear fangs. So they're a member of the colubrid family, so they don't have front fangs like western browns and that sort of thing. They have rear fangs, and they're a solid fang snake too. So the venom actually runs down a groove in the back of the fang. For this guy here to envenomate me, he'd have to really get a good chew on me and physically chew and bite to get those rear fangs to penetrate my skin.
But the brown tree snake has more than enough venom to take down their preferred prey of frogs, birds, lizards, rats, and bats.
They're toxins designed to kill the prey that they eat. So if they're hunting a bat, for example, and they're hanging out of a cave and they want to strike at a bat and hang on to it, they need to kill that bat pretty quickly because, as you probably know, most microbats have got razor sharp little teeth. And the last thing this snake wants is to be bitten by its prey.
What they may lack in firepower, they make up with bluff. This is a snake with attitude, and they love to show it.
If you encounter a brown tree snake and it isn't able to get away, it'll come up in this wonderful sort of multiple coil, and it will start striking and flatten the head and hiss, and it's a really pretty impressive display.
This medium-sized snake still shouldn't be taken for granted. It will, if nothing else, give you a damn good fright.
Very, very, very fast strike rate. She's not really cranky at the moment, but she'll coil up just like any snake, and she'll recoil back, and then an absolute instant push of all her muscles, she'll strike out forwards.
And for some people, the venom can also pose a considerable health risk. There's localized pain and swelling, but that degrees of swelling and pain is different from person to person. People react differently to the venom.
Some people might go into anaphylactic shock, whereas others might just go, oh, it's a temporary discomfort and not worry about it, but you just never know. You don't know how you're going to react, so if you did or were unfortunate enough to get bitten by one of these, you would be certainly wise to apply a constrictive bandage and seek medical help. Yeah.
Some people are actually big fans of these slippery creatures.
I reckon they're a very charismatic snake, personally. But yeah, she's a cool snake. I mean, I love anything in the wild. Snakes particularly I really like. I just think they're so maligned, and everyone seems to think that every snake's out there to kill you. And they're not. They don't recognise people as prey, so the only reason that they're going to feel threatened by a person is if a person's trying to threaten it. And they're just a beautiful animal. They really are a beautiful animal. All snakes, I don't discriminate. Its scientific name is Boiga irregularis, and the irregularis is in reference to the pattern on the snake, and the pattern is such that it breaks up its silhouette, and other animals and that can't focus too well on it because of the silhouette's all busted up.
The brown tree is a medium-sized snake with that attractive brown and cream banding down its entire body. This provides perfect camouflage in its varied habitat. It lives in open forests, rainforests, mangroves, caves, rural areas, and even urban areas of North Coastal Australia, Papua New Guinea, Indonesia, and the Solomon Islands. The brown tree snake is arboreal, meaning it is active at night, so therefore is less likely to become a victim of many daytime birds of prey. It's a very successful hunter and can eat prey of up to 70% its body mass. Its eyes have vertical pupils like that of cat's eyes and have numerous teeth, but only the very back two have grooves to deliver the venom.
Almost all of the dangerously venomous snakes in Australia belong to this single family, the Elapidae or the cobra family. But the brown tree snake is the exception. It's a colubrid snake. That's a group that's really dominant over most of the rest of the world, but only got to Australia quite recently in evolutionary terms. And the brown tree snake, as its name suggests, lives in the trees, and it's in places where there are trees.
The brown tree snake has even made its way to Guam, catching a lift aboard military vehicles and ships, and then devastating the local wildlife, causing the extinction of 12 native birds.
Brown tree snakes are sort of a classic example of an ecological criminal. At the end of the Second World War, the US forces in Guadalcanal and New Guinea took the old jeeps and so forth back to their base in the Pacific, it's the island of Guam. And Guam didn't have any snakes, but they brought brown tree snakes hidden inside those jeeps. And the brown tree snakes have wiped out the birds of Guam. And that's completely devastated the forest system. You know, insects outbreak because there are no birds. The snakes have caused catastrophe. And it's the classic example that snakes are ecologically very powerful, very important creatures. We don't sort of see them, but they really can change the way that ecosystems work.
So when we talk about dangerous animals, the danger doesn't need to be confined just to mankind. It can be to the entire ecosystem. And that is a risk that we can't afford to take. Taking on a human isn't an easy task for the brown tree snake. It's going to have to get its jaw wide open to inject its venom. So this alone is going to keep it from taking on the big guns. It's the third animal on the program, and it's going into the list at number 3. But it may struggle to maintain its spot as we meet a creature who begs the question, when is a stone a fish? When we think about dangerous animals, it's quite often the in-your-face style predator, one that leaves no doubt you're under attack, that first comes to mind. But it's not always the ones you can see that pose the greatest danger. This is an animal that's almost invisible to the casual observer, but you should be looking really closely, because if you aren't, your next step could bring you a world of pain. Every year, hundreds of people suffer a surprising, painful, and even life-threatening injury when enjoying the seaside, and they usually don't even know what's hit them.
One of the big problems for humans is you don't physically see them. These animals are set up to be camouflaged so that little fish swim past, they don't see them, and they swallow them whole. Because they look like a stone, because they're so well camouflaged, and because the spines that have the venom sacs on them are associated on their back, when you're walking through the water, you stand on them, and that's when people get stung.
What you're stepping on is a poison-packed animal called the stonefish, and it is not to be messed with.
Stonefish are probably the world's most venomous fish. They've basically got a series of, depending on the species, about 13 or 14 spines on their back, and each of those spines has associated with it a venom sac.
It's a crazy-looking creature that could easily be said to be made up of all the leftover spare parts, but it is in fact a well-designed pain machine.
The spines stand up, your foot goes down on it, the spines go into your foot, venom gets injected into your foot, the venom is associated to produce pain, and all you end up with is this person in immense pain.
Even the experts are not immune from its powerful venom.
Yeah, I've been nailed by a couple of stonefish. My last effort was I jumped off the top of a boat and landed on one and drove it up through my wetsuit booty into my heel, and that was pretty horrific. I was off colour for about 12 hours, so I spent sort of 6 hours in hospital with anti-venom and things of that nature, and it finally came around and I was back on the planet again. But yeah, it was 6 to 12 hours of my life that I don't want to go through ever again. It's a pain that arrives and just stays at that level. So the deaths that we do know of that are caused by stonefish haven't been a direct effect of the venom, it's been because the person has some indirect effect like drowning.
The recommended treatment is to immerse the injured part of your body in scalding water and find medical assistance immediately to be treated with antivenom. Jamie and his team collect stonefish venom for the production of antivenom, but it's a case of handle with care.
They can get very, very grumpy, very, very easily. So you've got to be careful of how you handle them.
Not only is the stonefish dangerous, it is ugly, so it definitely won't be winning any beauty pageants anytime soon. Instead of scales, this fish grows algae over its entire body, providing perfect camouflage in amongst the coral and rocky seafloor. But this really is the stonefish's ingenious design, as this is both its defensive and attacking weapon. It pays to be ugly out in the deep blue.
So the animal looks like a stone, it's an ambush predator, and the reason it looks like a stone is it's trying to attract other little fish to come and live near it.
It inhabits tropical waters in both the open ocean and rivers, preferring to hide amongst the rocky coral seafloor, waiting for its prey to swim close, and then ambushing small fish and shrimp.
As the fish come over, basically it's got a big mouth, it opens the mouth and swallows the fish whole.
The stonefish can be found on both the east and west coasts of Australia. It grows to about a foot to a foot and a half long, with an oversized mouth and stocky body with small fins, so swimming is not the stonefish's strong point.
They're not really good swimmers, and so they tend to hop when they go across the bottom. So they may be in the middle of a sand patch or a mud patch somewhere, but rather than get up and swim like most fish, they tend to bounce across the bottom. These are big, bulky animals with really tiny fins, so they don't swim all that well at all.
But it is a good breeder, as the female can lay up to 1 million eggs. Being a tidal creature, the stonefish can survive for 24 hours out of the water. So don't pick one up if you think it's dead, as it is just as dangerous in or out of the water. This ambush predator is taking on the pack and knocking them flying. It's one serious fish and is triumphantly stealing the #1 spot from the sea lion. With the stonefish at the top, this also means the demise of the Australian tarantula to #3 and the brown tree snake to 4. But flying in to make its mark is a seemingly cuddly critter with a potentially hazardous bite. Almost 40% of all mammals in the world belong to the Rodenia family, which is mainly made up of rats, mice, and squirrels. But guessing the next largest group of mammals would be a TV game show million-dollar question. Surprisingly, bats are mammals, and on top of that, they're also the second largest mammal group in the world. Australia has 90 species of bats, all of which are members of 2 subgroups, the microbats and the megabats. The most visible are the flying foxes and the fruit bats. Both can travel large distances searching for food.
It's been estimated that they travel about 50 kilometres for food every night. So that's usually in approximately a 20 kilometre radius of their home patch. So they'll roost in one particular spot predominantly, and then 20 kilometre radius from that area.
Robert McGregor is a fan of bats. They're his favorite animals at the Territory Wildlife Park just south of Darwin. One bat in particular has been at the park for over 15 years.
They're very individual. These guys are quite similar to having a dog or a cat. They're actually my favourite here because when you're working with a lot of animals aren't that interested in dealing with us. We're here to feed them and make sure that they're safe, and they are in a captive or semi-captive environment. These guys remember who we are, they know exactly who we are, they know what we like. They come up and they crave attention, and they crave to please us as we crave to please them. So I consider Leech as one of my family. She's my little baby. I'd give her a kiss if I could.
There's a good reason why Robert cannot ever get too close to his bats. These small mammals have been responsible for deaths and serious illness, not because they're threatening or even a little bit aggressive. It is what they carry that makes them a potential threat.
All bats are known to contain Lissa and Hendra virus. Hendra virus, they're assuming, is passed on from bats into horses and then from horses into humans. They're both fatal diseases. The Lissa virus, on the other hand, can be directly passed on from the saliva of an animal. So if Leech was to break the skin, or when she expels a fruit, if that fruit was to go into my eye, then I could be contaminated with Lissa virus. However, scientific evidence is not, well, we're not really sure how many bats carry Lissa virus. It can lay dormant inside an animal for up to 10 to 12 years. So although she's 15 years of age, we're pretty sure she doesn't contain any viruses. However, you always do have to be a little bit careful. We've all been inoculated with rabies vaccine, so that includes 3 injections. We have to get checked every 3 years and re-inoculated if our levels are low. If, for example, a member of the public was to get bitten or scratched by a wild bat, I think it's approximately 7 injections that they'll have to undergo in 2 weeks. So it's quite a serious problem. It is a fatal disease. The symptoms are quite similar to rabies. It is a rabies-borne disease, and as I said before, fatal. Quite a horrible, horrific death.
So bats won't directly attack us or even try to bite. But even though you may think you're doing the right thing if you try to rescue one or assist an injured bat, the consequences could be life-threatening.
It'll be a really nasty 2 weeks of injections for the person that tries to do the right thing with bats. It is really important that they phone some of the government authorities, for example, or wildcare, and we can come and collect them. Someone who's, oops, sweetie. As you see, they hang upside down, or the right way up, when it's time to defecate. Yeah, so it's really important that people seek advice as to when they find an injured bat.
There are over 950 species of bats in the world. They're found on every continent except the Antarctic. Bats hang upside down because it's energy efficient. Less energy is required to hang upside down compared with defying gravity and standing upright. Each night, bats consume between half and twice their body weight of fruit, often discarding the flesh of the fruit through their mouth and digesting the juice. The megabats do have some similarities to humans.
It's assumed that bats evolved about, well, they stopped evolving about 50 million years ago, and that's come from what people are assuming is some form of gliding mammal. And if you look at your hand, you can imagine that this wing has derived from the same lineage. So they'll have a forearm here, they'll have an opposable thumb, which is this part here, and then inside the wing you've got 4 digits, which form the shape of the wing. And inside this wing they've got a superfine membrane, and inside this membrane they're covered with thousands of little hairs which enable them to fly and feel their way through the thermals when they fly.
Bats are very common in Australia and can be seen even in urban environments like these flying foxes close to the Sydney Opera House. At sunset, it is a common sight to see thousands of bats take to the air. One myth that needs to be cleared up is that bats can suck blood from humans. There is only one species of bat worldwide that sucks blood from animals and humans, and that one is found in South America. The Australian fruit bats pose no direct danger to us. The only real threat is from rabies, so the advice is don't handle any bat without being vaccinated against rabies. Robert McGregor won't hear a bad word about bats. To him, they are an essential part of the Australian landscape and an animal that is very misunderstood.
If we've not gone in and spent quality time with these guys, or these girls I should say, here you go sweetheart, we'll walk into the enclosure and we'll have at least 2 to 3 of them swoop down on us and cling themselves wherever they can, using their opposable thumbs, clawing themselves all over our back and refusing to come off. So we might be stuck in there for 20, 30 minutes, just trying to peel them off. They do grip tight, and they grip in the most, oh, sweetheart, 20 minutes. And they grip in the most inconvenient of places.
A sweetheart, perhaps, but always avoid handling these creatures. The risk factor is going to see the fruit bat glide into number 3, bumping the Australian tarantula further down the list to 4th spot and the brown tree snake to 5th. However, looking to outdo its fellow tree dweller is a creature that lurks, waiting, ready to strike at night. They call him Dr. Venom, an adrenaline-fueled scientist risking life and limb to find the next animal-born wonder drug. His hands-on research has resulted in 26 snake bites, but the most terrifying of them all? A little-known striped nocturnal tree dweller, Australia's Stevens banded snake.
It's so scary where you're thinking of bleeding into your brain, and I came so close to switching careers just from the sheer terror of it.
Dr. Fry's heart-stopping encounter happened in 1997 while out collecting snakes for research. Deep in the rainforest at Mount Nebo near Brisbane in eastern Australia. His aim was to capture one of the rare Stevens banded variety. He got more than he bargained for.
But I just tried to tap it on the tip of the tail, and instead of moving forward, just swung along, went partially up the hook and nailed me. So it reacted in a way that I didn't anticipate it reacting.
Little did the venomologist know at the time that what he was dealing with was a short-tempered snake that would rather fight than flight.
They will get, pretty anxious and pretty upset, and they're quite happy to bite you if they feel that that's the only way out.
Within just 2 minutes of being bitten, Dr. Fry had collapsed unconscious. He felt no pain, but pumping through his veins were extremely potent procoagulant toxins almost identical to hormones in the human body that regulate blood pressure. Slowly, his blood was turning to water.
I came good about 10 minutes later, but by then my blood chemistry was completely destroyed. I was unable to clot. I was bleeding out of the wounds, I was bleeding out of scrapes that I had accumulated earlier in the day. And this is a very dangerous situation because I could die of internal bleeding. I could die from bleeding into my brain. I could end up permanently paralyzed from bleeding into my brain. I could die of bleeding into my stomach. I was absolutely terrified.
Listed as one of the top 20 most venomous snakes in the world, the Stevens banded snake is a medium-sized reptile, gray to black in color with brown or cream broad crossbands. It lies hidden in trees and beneath bark, coming out only at night to feast on birds, lizards, and small mammals. An alluring, venomous above-ground inhabitor with a unique vertical adaptation.
And the Stevens banded snake is probably the most spectacular example of a ground-dwelling lineage that has evolved a bunch of morphological changes. It's got keeled scales that help it climb and things like that. So it's a superb tree dweller, unlike almost all of the other Australian snakes.
For Dr. Brian Fry, bleeding profusely from every crevice in his body, including his mouth and eyes, the race was on to find an antivenom. But was there one for such an exceptional Australian species?
We weren't sure what, if any, of the antivenoms would work on it. And it took 18 hours to finally get an antivenom to work. And I'm losing blood the whole time.
A snake venom detection kit was used to find out what life-saving treatment was needed. Australia's deadly tiger snake had the answer. Its venom was compatible with the Stevens banded snake, although it was a poor crossmatch given the pair's distant evolutionary connections. As a result, Dr. Fry was given 4 ampoules of antivenom as opposed to the usual 1 needed to neutralize a typical tiger snake bite.
So the antivenom wasn't able to bind as efficient. So that meant that they just had to keep using more so that whatever little bit was binding, they could just start flooding it with that. And it ended up taking a staggering amount because that many ampoules of antivenom is a very unusual amount to need.
After 36 hours in hospital, Dr. Fry was discharged. His blood was returning to normal and his near-fatal emergency averted. But an accidental cut to his foot at home from a shard of glass saw a slow drip from the wound turn into pools of blood.
What had happened was that there was still some venom in my body that had been trapped deep in tissue, and it had worked its way loose as I was moving around, back at home and everything, went back into circulation and caused my blood coagulation profile to crash all over again. They had to give me more ampoules of antivenom.
Dr. Fry has not only lived to tell his tale, he's written a PhD on the much maligned Stevens banded snake. He's also patented its toxin as a treatment for congestive heart failure. And if you can believe it, he's gone round 2 with this cantankerous creature, being bitten again, all in the name of research. Now he knows what to expect and wants to spread the word.
With the Stevens, it's definitely one snake that you need to get in the hospital as fast as possible because this happens to be a very, very fast-acting venom that produces the kind of effects that could end up with severe permanent injury. All sorts of catastrophic things can happen, including death from cerebral hemorrhage.
This is not a friendly snake to encounter. However, you're probably unlikely to find it, so whilst it's not going in high on our list, it's certainly going to flick the brown tree snake to 6th and slide into its spot at number 5. The state of play is holding tight. The animals featured in this program aren't going to get much of a look in. The sea lion is only occasionally aggressive, so it's not going to make the cut. However, the stonefish is an ugly brute with a dangerous venom load. It's going in at number 6, pushing the bottom of the pack down and seeing the Sydney funnel-web spider scrambling out of the game. The great white is still dominant at number 1. With all of our Australian animals, there is a fear factor. But keep in mind, they're unlikely to harm you unless you're unlucky enough or foolish enough to get in their way. Be cautious, take note of the warnings, and show respect as we count down the list of 72 dangerous animals Australia.